Welcome to JACC This Week, where impactful science meets global insights. I'm Dr. Carolyn here with Dr. Harlan Krumholz and that special guest, Sarah Krumholz, as we go beyond the surface and talk about women's cardiovascular health from inclusion to redesign, the critical need for our systems to be redesigned so that women and men can both benefit.
I'm really glad we're doing this one specifically, Carolyn, because what we're going to be talking about is this issue about our profession. And this is a great issue to celebrate cardiovascular science that focuses on sex and gender differences, that really celebrates women's cardiovascular health. But this episode is really about taking a reflective look at how we do. And the idea is that it's not just about making sure women are included. It's about taking a step back and saying whether our systems are really serving the needs of women and the needs of men, and asking the question, why is it that we've got only 16% of cardiovascular specialists are women? And why is it that we have so few leaders? I mean, what is it about the most exciting field being able to attract such a small number of women into it? And what should we be doing about that? And I'm so pleased to have Sarah on as a guest. And hey, let's jump into it.
Well, you know what's funny? I was going to say this and I didn't, but you asked me at the beginning, you were like, oh, you look really nervous. And I was like, I am nervous, but I'm nervous because this is a very delicate, polarizing topic, but it shouldn't be, right? It's silly that it is, but it is one of those topics that we feel nervous, or at least I'm a medical trainee very, 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 very early in my career, very early in my training. And this feels like something scary for me to be on such a public platform talking about, and it shouldn't feel that scary. And it is, to what you're saying, why is that? It's because there's such nuanced components of how do we even talk about this in a way where everyone also feels seen in the conversation? I don't have an answer for that, but that's, yeah.
I think that's really important to say that, first of all, many people can give support, many people can provide sponsorship. And this is for you to come out publicly and talk about this, I think is brave, because, there is afraid that it could be a backlash, that people say, oh my God, there's just a woman talking about the women's stuff again. And, it's just, all the stuff that has created the current situation is out there still.
It's interesting. When I was applying to residency, I polled anyone and everyone on how do I navigate being a mom in my residency interviews, and is it something I should include? And I would say overwhelmingly, and this was across institution, across career levels, I would say the overwhelming response was very conservative and was it's far less risky for you to leave it out of your interviews as opposed to including it, because you don't know the viewpoint of the person who's sitting across from you, and you don't want that to hinder your inevitable rank. And it's interesting because I don't disagree with that advice. I think that's the right advice. And I give those individuals who gave me that advice a lot of credit, because that's a really hard thing to say, especially when you don't agree with that necessarily. But what I was reflecting on and really thinking about it, and to me, it almost says, well, for you to match, you shouldn't share being a mom, because being a mom will hinder you. And I think it embeds that idea that we're all still trying to figure out why we have in medicine of being a parent or being a mom is something we should hide or not talk openly about or not talk proudly about. And instead, it might be something that hurts your career. So think about it strategically or cautiously in terms of how you have this conversation with others. And it's interesting because my male colleagues who are dads or non-birthing parents definitely did not receive the same advice as I did. And ultimately, I chose not to hide it because I felt like it was inauthentic, and I really wanted to be authentic in my interviews. And it goes back to the question of, why aren't we questioning this? Why is it that this is our go-to to say, oh, you don't be as forthcoming, even if it might be a big part of your life? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's, again, a big part of why I wanted to write this piece and why I wanted to come on this podcast and talk about this, because I think it's important for us to ask that question of why are we still thinking this way? And
I do think it's definitely no man saying I'm a dad, there's There's no valence to that.
No, and I mean, transparently, I have friends who are dads who are medical students applying in this year and who were encouraged to share it, and almost as if it was, a positive component of their application. And I think that is interesting and worth exploring further, just as we think about this culture and need to make a shift to really create spaces where we are a little bit more welcoming to this idea of becoming a mom or a parent during training, or however you might identify your role. Yeah, and you may hear Hallie crying in the background right now. We can use that instead of the music. No, I'm just kidding. Being pregnant as a medical trainee, and it really exposed me to a lot of the nuances that women face in the clinical environment. One moment that was like so meaningful and helpful for me was when I came back and was pumping. There's so much added stress of how do I fit in pumping, but also seem like a very engaged trainee who's not, limit. And the piece that actually you published on supporting lactation support postpartum talks about this, but like needing to work your schedule into also patient care, which is challenging. And one of the attendings approached me and actually said, listen, we're making sure you're pumping as you need to. And I just want to say, like, I'm never going to wonder where you are, essentially. If you're not around, I will assume you were pumping. And it took so much pressure off for me just to know that there was that support. And so, I mean, anyone can do that, right? Like just to be acutely aware of the needs of your team.
And I think it gets back to the point I was trying to make in my editor's page, which is this is not about pulling women into this current system, because you will continue to have a legacy of issues forever. It's about the redesign. It's about if you were starting from scratch and you wanted to create this in a way that would be open, that women weren't afraid to talk about the complexities of life, their biological clock, the issues about being pregnant. I mean, I can remember Sarah telling me, in whether it's radiation exposure or exposure to pathogens, or just being a case when it's not just the risk to you, but it's the risk to the child you're carrying. And you're trying to, on the other hand, be all in. You want to be just like everyone else. You want to be, sleeves rolled up and show that you are on, and you're giving it everything. But at the same time, you've got additional consideration, just like the piece we've got in the issue on lactation, which I think will be eye-opening for people, because, I remember, Sarah, when you telling me about this, like how much more complicated your life, how when you had to withdraw, you're wondering, am I not there for questions? Are people judging my commitment to medicine because I'm stepping out and pumping? And all of these things are on people's minds, and we don't release them from that anxiety, that care. And by the way, sometimes they are penalized for not being there at the moment where something's happening. And it's not made right. So this is why the redesign, I think, is important. And this is why this issue, is here. We've got that lactation article. We've got Sarah's piece. We've got this piece from Mike Hunneberg talking about, do the risk models work for women and decision making and so forth. I mean, I think in some ways the commentaries are equally important to the original research science in this issue, as it sort of pushes a conversation, and it should not end with the issue. We're just trying to begin, catalyze, get this moving. And I think that JACC as a journal should continue to return to this until we've actually seen movement.
That's so wonderful. And Sarah, do you have any advice for those who might be listening in?
Well, I'll say, if there's any medical student listening in who's thinking about starting a family in medical school or has had the experience and wants to connect, I'm always welcome. I think those moments of connection are important. And I'll say, no matter the level of training that you're at, be it medical student all the way up to attendinghood, the biggest parts of my experience that were so meaningful were the moments that women approached me and had really wonderful conversations about their own experiences and challenges potentially that they faced, and really able to empathize with what I was experiencing, and just creating spaces that felt really safe for support. And I think the more we can do that for each other, the more that we're going to really be able to, I say this in the piece, but, lean on one another when we feel like it's almost impossible. And I think that be it mentorship or just peer-to-peer support is so critical.
At least the system ought to acknowledge that we want to help you. We want to support you because you are actually going through something special, and this is the right time to be doing it in your life. And we're going to make sure it's okay. It's okay. There's a few things that are going to happen because you are, essentially wearing ankle weights in this race. And by the way, it's for a good reason. It's a joyous event. But, don't worry because, there's certain things that are happening to you that aren't happening to your colleague who's also pre-parenthood. And we got to redesign the system. But if we don't start talking about this, if we don't start redesigning, then we're consigned to accepting these differences. And in cardiology, it is a signal. Having 16% in cardiology is a signal. The signal is it's not welcoming. It's not possible for most people, that we're repelling a large part of the talented workforce from considering to going into this field because it is 50-50 in medical school, more than 50-50, more women than men. And the fact that we are underrepresented, it means that we are somehow sending a message strongly and clearly that this is not a welcome place for women. And so women aren't choosing to go into it, even though it is the most exciting field. We do the best work. It's the most rewarding. Why did we all come into cardiology? Because it's amazing. So then why aren't more women coming in? And that has to be an important question to ask. And it's not solving for saying the goal is to have more women. We're solving for what is it about the current design that says that we can't make this open to everyone. And by the way, I would say the men are suffering because of that too. And so, that's what the challenge is for us. Maintain the standards, maintain the excellence, maintain the commitment, but figure out how to create a system that's welcoming to all. Not inclusion, not pulling people into the old system, but creating the new system.
Exactly.
We are doctors. This is part of life. And if we want to create a profession that's welcoming and open, we've got to figure out how to redesign it so that this fits. By the way, menopause has similar issues. I'm just saying they're natural issues in life that also affect how they are. And so, other people have other health issues as they travel through training in their lives. But these are predictable changes that happen for women. And we ought to be able to figure it out. And this is just a small part of the reason. This doesn't even get into the issues about systematic discrimination or other kinds of things, boys clubs and all the kinds of things that are historic. But this is just talking about how we handle biology within the profession. And, this is just one piece. It's not the whole piece. It's one piece, but it's an important piece. In addition to everything else, we need to think about how we break down longstanding barriers and longstanding perceptions and longstanding mental models that have prevented women from coming into the profession and then climbing to the highest levels of leadership, which are so important for us that happen, that be an open avenue if they choose to take it and not be as hard as it is.
Thank you, Harlan, for sharing Sarah with us. I have to admit, what you told me when you knew Sarah was coming on the show is absolutely right. When she graduates, we're going to replace you with her, okay?
Yeah, I told you. I can told you a better version.
No, not at all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And audience, you've been listening to JACC This Week, bringing impactful science with global insights. If you liked what you heard, subscribe, share, and email us at jack@acc.org. See you again next week.